What's up, my miners of intelligence and consciousness? I'm Rick Brooks, and this is Rick's Mind. Today with me, I have Andrea Haverkamp, who is a labor organizer and a professor at San Diego University.
Yes, University of San Diego.
University of San Diego. All right. We're gonna redo that, John.
Yeah,
we can't fuck that up. Welcome to the show. I'm really glad that you're back. We've got a lot to get into. And I normally, our listeners know who you are, so I'm just going to go ahead and blast off. I'm not even going to give you time to talk because there's a lot going on. We've got Congress, and I'm just going to give you what I know, and you can tell me how correct or incorrect I am. We've got Congress who has passed or not passed a law, they voted against the rail unions and said, you need to get to work. Now, I'm thinking, so far, how am I doing? Am I doing well? Okay, cool. I'm going to keep going. So they voted it down and as a Band-Aid. Now, what a lot of people don't realize, and I have experience in the shipping industry in a past life. This is the busiest time of year. This is Q4. This is Christmas. We live in a consumer economy. So for them to strike now, and it's oftentimes a lot cheaper to move things intermodal via intermodal, which is another fancy way of saying over the rail, right? Like it's a lot cheaper for shippers to move things over the rail. Them striking right now would fuck everything up. Like it would be so bad. Everything would have to go over the road. And when that happens, then you would, and there's certain shipments that have to get places immediately. Then you're gonna need to employ teams. That's more expensive, which are 2 drivers. So no one wants this to happen, right? So you put a Band-Aid on it. The rail workers are not happy about this. So where does that leave us now? That's the $1 billion question in the room right now. And that's a lot. And I did well?
Yeah. So Congress imposed a contract deal. And there is certain mechanisms that the federal government and the rail companies work with. There's a special arbitration board, there's a special mediation board, there's a special presidential emergency committee. All of these mechanisms are in place. This is not the first time this has happened. Do you know how many times this has happened in U.S. history?
You know, I don't. I'm very curious to know.
18 times since 1926.
Damn.
So I guess to go to where we are today, if I may, I would like to go back to the 1800s.
Oh, hell yeah. I love history. Let's go.
So in the 1800s and in the mid-1800s, labor organizing was essentially illegal. Not only did the United States have outright slavery, there was other forms of ways of keeping everyone down. In the mid to late 1800s, there were criminal cases against workers who had quote unquote conspiracy to raise their wages through actions that today we know as like labor organizing. Now, in 1877, there was the Great Railroad Strike. Now, in this 1877 Great Railroad Strike, about 100,000 workers were involved. Through a combination of unofficial, boss-led, company-led militias, federal troops, the National Guard, they attacked workers with over 1,000 arrests and 100 deaths. And industry continued to cut wages and break unions. This one lasting impact of this that we'll see up till today is the National Guard, local militias, and the government saying, holy shit, we don't have enough control over our infrastructure. Workers can really strike and upend our entire society if they're not getting fair payment. So instead of fair payment, what is the answer is, right, more laws, more militia, more National Guard. So after 1877, there began to be more armories and more surveillance in working class areas, and in particular around key infrastructure, because this strike in 1877, that was ad hoc, that was random, that was a little unsuccessful, but did have 100,000 workers in the population, a lot smaller back then, had demonstrated the power of what national labor organizing could be. And this was when there was no national railroad union at all, only railroad brotherhoods and sort of job-specific craft organizations. And after this, about 10 years later, you see the Arbitration Act with some panels and some non-binding sort of work in the 1898 Erdman Act. But folks about 20 years later said, okay, well, we know what we have the power to do. There's the 1894 Pullman strike. And in 1894, this was 250,000 workers. A lot of this was the Pullman factory, which at the time you've heard of company towns. Pullman not only manufactured rail cars, but they also were the landlords for workers. Pullman was treating a small number of workers compared to that 250,000 very unfairly. But you know what? Across the entire industry, people were like, you know what? Because of what they're doing to the workers in Pullman, we're not going to load the cars. And the other people said, you know what? Well, we're not going to drive the cars. We're going to keep these trains grounded. The entire industry came to a halt. 1894 Pullman strike is huge. Federal troops, again, ended the strike by force. There were some concessions. Workers got a little bit more. Eugene Debs, who would later run for president, an out socialist, was imprisoned due to the 1894 Pullman strike. In 1916, less than 20 years later, there was the talk of an incredible, even bigger strike threat of 94% of rail workers. You know what we got out of that? The 8-hour day and in the groundwork for minimum wage laws, the Adamson Act of 1916. But things were still not fair. I mean, as you know it, people are working fucking hard out there. So in 1922, after World War I, and people sacrificed a lot, went to war, died, worked long hours to support the war effort, there was another huge rail strike in 1922 with militias and federal and National Guard troops on one side, huge scab efforts, a giant strike. After it ended, the capitalist class, the powers that be, said we must have the Railway Labor Act of 1926, which has been used 18 times, including by President Biden, to stop and withhold the potential of a strike. They said, you know what? Workers are getting too much. They're in control of too much. How can we control them? Quote unquote labor law comes into effect. So this has been amended in the 30s and later to include airlines too. So the airlines cannot just stop. You do not have the freedom to do that. So there's labor law, then there's labor freedom. Under labor law, these rail workers do not have the legal ability to stop working, which is, I think, way more criminal than if they did start working. So this isn't even the end, because we've got it 1945 to 1946. What would you say if I told you about 1 in 10 or more, depending on how we cut the numbers, working Americans were on strike in 1945 to 1946?
I would be shocked.
It is so untalked about, and it's interesting what histories are hidden from us. Nearly 5 million people struck from 1945 to 1946. Major nationwide rail strikes started with 800,000 steel workers going off the job, ripple effects, solidarity strikes, secondary strikes, rail negotiations faltered. Do you know what President Truman tried to do to stop this strike?
What did he try to do? I don't know.
He tried to draft the workers. There was a law put into Congress that sought to say, what if we just drafted all of these rail workers, these 800,000 workers, made them federal armed forces, and then they have to, under threat of treason or sedition, go back to work. That was a legitimate policy proposal that went forward.
It's so crazy.
It is absolutely bonkers. And this is what happened in 1945, 1946. And guess what happened after this unfathomably large took Congress, the government, and the military to stop this post-World War II strike where people said, enough is enough. We demand fair wages and rest and days off work, which Biden is not letting them have. We got what is called sometimes the Wagner Act, sometimes called the National Labor Relations Act. The framework from which all labor unions operate today came in 1947 on the heels of 5 million people, the closest thing to a general strike in American history. How many rail strikes have we had since 1947?
12. I don't
One.
know. One. Oh,
One.
man.
In
Okay.
1992, 2 days afterwards, Congress used their power to stop it. It was incredibly minor. 92 Clinton era. I'm not sure if it was Clinton or outgoing W or Big Bush on the way out. But just the interconnectedness of one company out of today, I believe there's 12 major companies that make up the railway system. 12 freight rail unions, but a smaller number of employers. Just one of them struck. And it was enough that in 2 days, the federal government said, not even one small part of the railway system may strike. So all that to say, what happened under President Biden is actually not that unusual. And it is terrible. It would be terrible for them to strike right now. But how even more terrible is it for people to work and have to notify 30 days in advance if you need to take a medical day off, so unpaid? Do you know when you're going to be sick 30 days from now? You sprain your ankle?
No, not at all.
No. So I think it would be terrible for the U.S. economy if there was a big strike and corporate owned and institutionally friendly media made a good deal about that. And it would be terrible. But these workers, a third of which have lost their jobs over the past 6 years due to precision scheduled railroading, pioneered in 2016. 0 paid days off, 0 paid sick days off is terrible. So there's some money in this contract that the federal government pushed forward using the powers that they have, but it's not enough to give people what they need, which is rest, balance, time off, the ability to celebrate the birthday of a loved one, be with your kid if they're sick. So I think that's what happened is actually a continuation of a 100-year history, over 100-year history of the suppression of farm workers, agricultural workers writ large, rail workers and infrastructure workers who, without production and consumption runs to a halt. And the most important thing, the dollar bill starts to slip.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, that was honestly beautifully put. Very impassioned. Loved it. Did not know any of this history, which is fascinating to me. I'm way too pigeonholed into like a military history and combat and all that stuff. So it's good to I know all about the Battle of Blair Mountain, right, which is a coal miners' strike, which is insane. But I didn't know about the rail workers. So thank you so much for sharing that with me and my audience. I find it interesting though. So we have pays on the table. Paid sick time, right? They're trying to get 7 paid sick days, and let's see, we talked about pay, and then I don't know if like vacation was in there. Like, kind of, if you could kind of let everyone know what their demands are.
Yeah, I believe you kind of covered it. Is sick 7 sick days off is kind of really part of the core. A statement by Railroad Workers United say that they find it despicable but not surprising that both parties opted to side with big business over working people last week and vote against the interest of rail workers not once but twice within hours, suffered a 1-2 punch at the hands of first the Democratic Party, second served up by the Republicans. It is straightforward. Union Pacific and BNSF Railway are using attendance policies that really just punish workers for taking any time off the job. Engineers and conductors face penalties for taking time off, including in the labor dispute, weekends outside of holidays and pre-planned vacations, even in the case of emergency. Really, this attendance policy and being on call and just a few hours notice before taking on shift is not that dissimilar to what happens in hospitals. Yeah. So weekends and emergencies basically being 365, 24/7 on call with only a few hours notice to take shift combined with tightening schedules and stiff punishments under this super sort of lean operation that has reduced a third of the jobs since 2016, makes their jobs more unsafe, more demanding, at the same time, more and more on call to try to maximize efficiency.
Oh, yeah.
And this puts strains on finances, families, and health. And that has to be balanced with the fact that BNSF has a net income of nearly $6 billion in 2021, up 16% from the previous year, says the New York Times. Union Pacific likewise has a net income of $6.5 billion, up 16% since 2020. Granted, the pandemic happened, but there is money there to hire enough people to give you 7 days off a year. Other freight companies, CSX Transportation and Norfolk Southern Railway, have also posted large gains. But 12 unions altogether are demanding a better workplace. In this particular strike threat was from just 4 of the 12, representing just over half of 115,000 rail workers covered by the deal. These 4 unions had voted down the deal, citing the main concern on top of all of this: just give us sick days. Let me catch the flu and stay home and not lose my job, or come into my job and get everyone sick and endanger not only us, but our performance in keeping everything safe. So those are the major demands.
I think those are definitely reasonable. It's interesting, right? You know, these companies are, I believe most of them are publicly traded, so they have shareholders to report to. But at the same time, like if you have 12, all the unions, right? Most of your employees are pissed and they're wanting to strike. You know, you've got to do something, right? Something's got to give. It is interesting. I want the strike to happen. I mean, I probably shouldn't, but I'm a big fan of chaos, right? And I want to know what it would I feel like that would just, probably after Christmas, but after Christmas. But I am very curious. It's our understanding too. We were talking to Nelson, what is his name? Lichtenstein? Yeah, Nelson.
Yeah, Nelson Lichtenstein.
I got it. And he said that one of the largest strikes ever is going to occur in 2023, and it's going to be for UPS. UPS workers are about to strike. So I find it very interesting that we're in a very strike-ridden era of America, which it's not something you hear about. This is not something. I've seen a few hospital strikes, but I haven't seen something like this would affect all of us. Whether you want to admit it or not, like everyone, a lot of people buy, most of you fucks buy things on Amazon. Yeah, everyone does. Amazon, or you pretty much anything that you see in a store was fucking shipped there. Most of it, unfortunately, came from a fucking boat. A lot of it came from a boat from China and was loaded from a container onto a rail car and shipped either from the port of Baltimore. I'm not even going to get into the name. Port of Seattle, whatever. That's all shipped. So I'm really would love to know how that would affect. I mean, we'd have shortages, I would assume, of most things really, really quickly. And I can't, and I'm assuming that the costs of things would go up dramatically. Partly because you'd be forced to ship things on trucks and the price of fuel. I mean, I know that those rates I still have some friends in that world. Those rates are compressed a little bit right now, even the high cost of fuel. But if a lot of things started flooding on to trucks and things going over the road, the rates would skyrocket. So the prices of everything would skyrocket too. So I don't know how we get out of this. Like, are the rail workers going to, after Q4, is there a way that they could all say, fuck it, we're walking? Is there a way they can do that?
So,
and how would they do it?
So this is the question that I think in a recent podcast by Labor Wave Radio I listened to, they had a law professor on there who talked about the difference between labor freedom and labor rights. Do they have the legal right to walk off the job according to labor law and all of the implications it would have on their union's treasury, the legality of such? Technically, no. Right? That's not protected. That's not what's considered a protected activity. Could they literally, using 2 legs, 2 hands, stop? Yes. And that is the reality that is concealed from us at every single moment of our working lives, that at any given moment, every single person at McDonald's can throw up their hands, put them behind their head, and say, I'm not doing a damn thing until I get 15 an hour. We all have the ability on any given day to do that, and to have the people who control our wages, our retirement, our healthcare, to make concessions to meet us where we need to be to live healthy, happy, humane lives. Now, will they make that move to go against labor law and perform an illegal strike? I think there are some groups out there who are taking bold and adventurous steps to strike outside of what labor law says you should or should not do and what is protected and not protected. In particular, I'm looking at the campaign that Starbucks workers and Workers United is putting forward, being very ready and very eager to wildcat strike and solidarity strike. They just struck at over 100 stores on Red Cup Day, when Starbucks has their fancy free plastic red cups. It was right around the Thanksgiving holiday. That potential is there. I think that it would be very, very rare for that to happen, given that only one strike in the past 80 years has happened in a national railroad, and was quashed 2 days later by Congress. I mean, the federal government and losing your job and or being arrested is a pretty hefty threat against you. So in terms of labor freedom, I'm not sure if a lot of people feel like they have the freedom to be able to do such a strike. And these can all be averted instantly with 7 paid sick days, hire up a few more people, lower the corporate bonuses, lower the executive salary pay. I'm sure that as soon as you hit $100,000, $200,000 a year, you're eating the best steaks there are. You're doing good.
I'm gonna push back on that one though. How would you feel if, let's say, you're running a company? How would you feel? And you're the best. You're able to structure things. You've been able to figure out a plan, a roadmap to acquire other companies, right? That would make your company more efficient, or maybe they have they manufacture. Let's use manufacturing for example. They manufacture. You have 2 manufacturing companies. You've got company A and company B. Company B has maybe a little bit better technology, but it's ran really shitty. And you want to go in and you're able to structure a deal. You purchase that. You're able to steal a bunch of but you've bought a bunch of human capital and also a bunch of parts, right? And it makes your company better, right? How would you feel though? And you make a lot of money because of this, but how would you feel if someone's like, you make too much and we want you to make less? Like, if you were that person, how would you want to make less money, even though that
how much money? Well, I guess that's hard because I personally feel that in the 1930s there was a proposal that had a lot of popular momentum. It was called a maximum wage.
That's stupid.
I personally subscribe to a maximum wage, so I think that. Yeah.
Okay.
These are the Overton windows that have been stolen from us. It used to be a very legitimate proposal. In fact, someone was slated to run for president, Huey P. Long, senator from Louisiana.
The kingfish. Yeah.
Who had every man a king, but like no one is like the monarch. Sort of like everyone gets their fair share, but no one. I don't know. I can't see. It would be a different human entirely who would go into a situation and gobble up so much money with my wage that other people can't take a sick day to take care of them or their kid.
I'm not saying that. We have to table that one, but we're gonna need to talk.
We can go back to the maximum wage
real quick.
anytime.
We're gonna be derailed for a second, folks, because I've never heard this. So I'm fascinated right now.
Yeah.
Okay, pitch it to me. Why? Help me understand why you believe that someone would need and what is the maximum wage? Let's have a I'm trying to think of the word, a mind exercise, for lack of a better term, right? Like, tell me why someone would need a maximum wage, and then what would said maximum wage be, and also who would be able to determine the maximum wage.
So in 1942,
Okay.
U.S. President FDR proposed a maximum income adjusted to 2021.
Okay.
During the war, a maximum wage of $414,000.
Okay.
And this was part of an economic stabilization program. At the part of it, it was pitched according to FDR. This is within the realms of common everyday political discourse, as normal back then as today, a discussion on should the minimum wage in Oregon be pegged to inflation or not, right? Like as mundane. So this was just common parlance. That this is what FDR said. I believe that in the time of this national danger, when all excess income should go to win the war, no American citizen ought to have a net income after they've paid their taxes of more than $25,000 a year. It's indefensible that those who enjoy large incomes, yada yada, should be immune from taxation while we're at war, interest on such securities. So this is during the war.
Okay.
Now, do you remember what the top nominal tax rate was in the years that followed the war during the greatest economic prosperity we ever had?
No, I don't.
So this maximum wage was never implemented, first of all, but the Revenue Act of 1942 had an 88% top tax bracket of all income over $200,000, which is huge back then.
So wait, time out. They were going to... Everyone that made, just so I'm making sure I'm following, everyone that made $200,000 a year was going to be taxed 88% of their earnings. Is that what you're saying?
Every dollar beyond 200,000. This was real. This is the reality U.S. we had, is that every dollar of that, and that would be about like $3 million a year. So if you already make $3 million a year, your $3 million first dollar almost all goes to taxes.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be $3.38 million in current money.
And so the idea is at this point, it's a waste of our shared collective resources, our shared collective GDP. Because you're not going to go out and buy more cereal. You're not going to go out and go to school again, right?
100%.
Like that money is better spent investing in workers and being given to Social Security or a jobs program. And so all the way through the 70s and up till Reagan, we had very high top tax brackets, which are now down around the 30s. But it was reality. And what built the middle class and the working class up in the 40s, 50s, 60s to have a top tax rate that effectively kind of chopped the curve off, so that if I was paying an employee the $3 million in first dollar, I would say, actually, this is all going to taxes. I think you're fine with $3 million. You got the best schools, you got great cars, you have a great house, like you're good. I'm going to instead take this dollar and keep it in my business or my nonprofit or whatever, and I'm going to invest in better technology, or I'm going to hire another worker. It's inefficient. It's inefficient for Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos to have billions of dollars doing nothing. It's not employing anyone. It's not bettering working conditions. It's not invested. It's just kind of money hanging there. So yeah.
Okay. And I want to get back there. There's a few things. I think that's a terrible idea. And here's why. I see the incentive would be that they would they would either leave their money in the business or do or because okay, I'm not in favor. I hate taxes, right? You don't? Do you like? Do you? I mean, just between you and it, do you like the federal government? Do you think that they spend their money well?
So I guess
just I'm just saying.
So unmoored from the idea of maximum wage in general, am I a huge proponent of the United States federal government? I will say that I believe in the potential of people to come together through shared governance and to distribute resources together. So I believe in the ability of people to come together. I don't know if I'm going to on the books state either support or opposition to the U.S. federal government. So
just based off of your answer, you would feel comfortable potentially after at your 3 millionth and first dollar, 80, let's say $1 million after that. 88% of that would go to the government, and you think that they would use your money well, correct?
I would prefer that they don't try to pay me that extra $1 million.
Well, that's fair, but
instead,
hold on. I'm at a very pointed question. Would you want 88% of 1 million to go to the government? That's a yes or no.
No, and that's why it's an effective deterrent.
Okay, all right.
So that's one way the maximum wage is introduced. It's strong deterrence, just like cigarette taxes, right? Do you want to pay $15 for 2 cigarettes?
No.
Exactly. So that's the idea of like one way that you can try to change social behavior through shared like taxation and stuff like
but
something like that.
At the same point, I'm a big fan of individual liberty. So why would I ever want to pass a law if you choose to smoke and that's your truth? Like, if that's what you want to do, I don't want to pass a law to discourage. Like, you have the information. We all know it's bad for you, right? So I believe in, personal accountability and responsibility. Another thing about the maximum wage. So you said you used Elon Musk and Bezos as an example. These people don't.
I'll also use the president of Oregon State University.
There you go. I like that too. You said that. We'll use those. We'll use the first two just for argument's sake.
Yeah.
You said that they don't just have billions of dollars sitting in a bank account. They have equity, and I'm sure that there are people screaming, but they have, let's say, the equity in these companies, right? They're owners, so they have shares. So they in order for them to extract those shares, they would need to sell them. All right. So it's pretty liquid, right? You can sell shares, but then if you're starting to pull out of a company, then the value of that company is going to go down. People are going to panic, so they don't want to do that. And I'm not defending billionaires, but I am saying that when people are super innovative, I don't think it's a good idea to put a cap on how much you can earn. Like it or not, we live in a winner take all society, and the reason, and it has its problems, right? Like we have problems with monopolies. There's a lot of things that we should probably look into changing, but to think that the government, which I despise, would tell me how much fucking money I could make is insane. That's giving them way too much power. They have way too much power as it is. That sounds draconian. That sounds like we're taking a step in a direction that wouldn't be good and that doesn't end well. Would you not agree?
I disagree, because for all of the wealth hoarded by these few crooks, there are people sleeping and freezing to death in the streets of Portland, Oregon. For all of the money Jeff Bezos has in equity, in shares, and investments, there are Amazon workers making scraps above minimum wage, breaking their bodies to ship those boxes. Their pay could be doubled. They could have retirement. They could have pensions. That money could be used for the betterment of humankind. In a winner-take-all system, which I do not like, there are going to be people losing their lives. And the choice before us is whether we come together and we build a structure and institutions and a way of life in which no one has cruel and inhumane living conditions, digging through dumpsters for food because they don't have enough, when we know that he has enough. He has enough money to lift people up. That money can be distributed fairly. And I don't believe that foundations and nonprofits are going to do what they need to do because they're not publicly accountable. So government at its best looks like a house of roommates living together, talking, building trust, and sharing resources equitably. You wouldn't let one of your roommates starve to death in your living room while you sit over here and have DoorDash every night. No one would do that. So why do we do that at a societal scale where one person living in Washington State, a Bezos or a Microsoft executive, has more than enough to eat, more than enough to live, almost too much money? They couldn't even spend it all in their lifetime. Meanwhile, people are dying. Okay. So the question is really life or death on what we do with this shared good, this shared productivity, shared resources. And the private accumulation of capital is a cultural blip in humanity's hundreds of thousands of years radar. This is new and it's not good.
So I respect that, but I'm going to push back again just a little bit, just a scotch. You purchase things from Amazon, correct?
Yes.
You need to vote with your dollar. Nothing is ever going to change until you vote with your dollar, right? So like that corporation is making money off of you, and you just explained how much you don't like this person, yet you're giving him your money. So that's why.
That's like
but hold on. But
if you don't like the air, don't breathe.
No, but that's not. That's really not it. There are other alternatives. You could shop at smaller stores. You could. It would be more expensive. But the bottom line is, we all vote with their dollars, and nothing is ever going to change. Every time you purchase something, you give him more power. You increase the share. You increase the stock prices, right? Like that's it's cool. And it's awesome, and I agree with a lot of the things you're saying, especially in terms of like, I do understand that these people, they're on timers, they have to have time breaks, it's insane. But no one at the end of the day really gives a shit because it affects your bottom line and your dollar, and most people vote wrong. That's dark.
John, I think I saw a hand.
Yeah. So here's the flaw in that argument, right? We don't have a vibrant economy where there is, for every item that's sold, there's 5 to 10 to 20 or an infinite amount of makers. Meritocracy is a myth. We have if you look into like, and I'm not talking like, like Pepe Silva go deep kind of stuff. I'm talking like 2 clicks on Wikipedia. You can find that like for every industry, everything is owned by probably like maybe 2 or 3 companies, or like even further than that. Like what is Nestle owns like probably like a third of the world economy. And I'm like not even exaggerating on that. They have a bunch of, they buy up a lot of brands. And so when you have these situations, right? So like, let's take the town that I live in, Corvallis, Oregon, which is kind of an exception. Let's be real. There are what, 3 Safeways, a Fred Meyer, a Winco, and a grocery outlet. And then there are 2 of a locally owned food co-op, right? Most places don't have locally owned food co-ops. So when you really put that down, that's 3 grocery store chains, maybe 4. And pretty soon, because Albertson and Safeway, or Albertson and Kroger are merging, and the feds are probably going to, approve that, that will mean there will be 2 different companies that I can buy groceries from, or 3. There's Winco, there's Grocery Outlet, and there's Fred Meyer, Safeway, Albertsons, Kroger, Payless, everything.
Trader Joe's.
But still, even Trader Joe's is like private label stuff that most places, they just pay to make. Yeah. So there really isn't true variety.
Hold on, Andrea.
Yeah, I think what you're both getting at is the individual model of change or the sort of system and structural model of change. And I could have easily lied. Tons of people lie and say they don't do online shopping. So, thank God for me.
Well, no, I would have called you out because you raised your hand from previous.
The specific thing, it's like, where the fuck do I find on Division Street in Portland, Oregon, a laptop stand, and I'm working 40 to 50 hours a week. I'm busy. Where do I find like a laptop prop-up stand? Now, it could be nationalized, a service like Amazon, and it could still pay people well, but it's the sort of argument that like, oh, you don't like lithium mining? I see you use a cell phone. Take that, children slave advocate. It's an individual market solution to what is a collective societal problem. So voting with dollars is good, but what we need is structural change, because I cannot individually consume my way out of a broken system.
No, and I 100% agree. And I did mention that in the beginning, because this is a huge problem facing America, right? The fact that we're having like, John, you used a really good example, especially with the grocery stores. There used to be a ton.
I was gonna say, you want a better one?
Well,
AT&T bought out all the cell phone towers around here, so now my Verizon phone doesn't work.
This is what I was getting. Yeah, so I'm getting you have major problems with grocery stores, with telecommunications. I mean the whole Comcast thing, like that, they're getting too big. Yeah, Amazon's getting too big. Facebook, like these things need to be broken up. I mean, we need a bunch of monopoly busting that goes on just to increase competition, because when you have either an oligarchy of businesses, and I probably, forgive me, I probably used the wrong terminology there, or, a monopoly, that the American consumer loses. So these are huge issues. But in anything that leans towards control or more power placed in the hands of people that are incredibly crooked, like you I would assume you'd be someone that is more democratic leaning, correct? And this is supposedly the most pro-union president we've ever had, and he just said fuck the unions, right? Like, you can't trust these people. They don't relate to any of us at all. They're all crooked. It's terrible. I hate the government. I'm on a rant now, but I'm going to stop. But I'm just saying, it's all about individual liberty, freedom, and smaller government, and there's more autonomy, right? And more options, right? The more competition, the better off we're going to be. But I want to also say this. And I mean this. You are a fucking beautiful person. You're awesome. You have a big heart. And it's fun to disagree with you and also have a respectful disagreement, because I am very curious of how you ended up getting to your thought process. And this is like these types of conversations where we were respecting each other, we're not yelling. They need to happen a lot more often, which is one of the reasons I love talking to you, and I love having this podcast. Is it's okay to disagree with someone.
100%. Because what we've lost really in the past, a few decades is what they call in urban planning the third space, right? Like, you have your home, you have your work, and then where is the place for public mingling, exchanging of ideas? That's really one of the last remainings is the library, but like a third place you don't have to pay for. Where are the city squares and the places that the public can go and exchange ideas and dialogue? Those don't really exist anymore. They've all been purchased or leased out. I mean, you're running out of subway benches in New York City. Like, you can't even sit and wait for your train anymore because they're trying to keep people from sleeping on them. They don't have bus benches anymore in a lot of Portland. They have these weird things that you're supposed to lean on. It's gross, but like, the more we do that, the more we isolate ourselves in front of screens, the less chance we have to return to a society, if it ever existed, where we can have meaningful disagreements. And the outrage sort of like machine is so profitable. It is so profitable for MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, and all of the minor media companies, all of whom are owned by Disney, etc., major institutions. It is so profitable to demonize one side, lift up the other side, and then realize that there's so many shades of grays and colors. I don't identify as red or blue, like electorally. I am a precinct committee person of the local Democratic Party, but that is something I do because I find it interesting, not because I deeply believe in the Democratic Party for the reasons you mentioned. I mean, the super majority vote to impose this terrible deal is one reason why they will never work for us. Their interests are not our interests.
No, they're not aligned. And this is the thing that scares me is, obviously you could tell I am pretty fucking pro business, right? I definitely am. But I think it's very important, for whatever reason, this is something that you'll be on the podcast again, I'm sure. I love talking to you. As I get older, and as you get to know me more, you'll find that I like chaos. I get excited. So if this strike happens, I feel like it'll be very chaotic. And I think these types of things are good because it means that people understand that they still have power, right? Power not placed in the institution of government, but placed in themselves, in someone that is just like you. You have a bunch of people that are like MAGA. Donald Trump has nothing fucking in common with you. He's a billionaire. His parent. He's not blue collar. His dad was a multi-millionaire. You are the gum on his shoes to him, right? The same thing with AOC, whatever, any of these people, right? You have nothing in common, and it's so easy. Red, blue, whatever. They're all like, no, this is my savior. No, these people have nothing in common with you, and you demonize the person that is way more similar to you and has the same world perspective, a little bit different, but the same. Let's say socioeconomic class. They might be your neighbor. They have a Trump flag, and you might have a whatever. Anyways, but you demonize that person. But when you see a strike like this, it's people that are all in the same situation, finding collective power in a group and standing up to the rest of the world together and saying, "Fuck you. We're not getting what we want. No one else is helping us. It's up to each other, and we're going to lean on each other, and we're going to figure it out." And I think that it's important to see a lot of things like that happen. And it's because we have to get to the point, and John, you pointed out a great point. The grocery store thing, that's pretty fucking scary if you think about it. We're building these massive corporations. You had the largest transfer and wealth, right, to fucking Walmart, Amazon, all these companies, and all these independent shops went out of business. It's the innovation is going to suffer at one point. We're not going to get the best products. We're probably going to lose a lot more family-run farms. I didn't even want to get. We should probably talk about that someday on the pod, though. Is how many how there's such few family farms anymore, and now there's sorry, I got sidetracked there. But
industrial agriculture.
Yeah, that's a topic for a whole nother story. But it's what kind of world do we want to live in? Because I feel like you and I, we want this. This is what I always try when I'll ask you very pointed questions. We're really not that far off. We've just taken different paths on how to get there. I feel like the difference between you, I think you and John are probably more similarly aligned here, is that you guys have more compassion and empathy than I do, and I might be a little bit more like analytical. It's my money. Fuck y'all, dude. I feel like that's kind of the difference.
I mean, I was going to say that Andrea's very impassioned. I had never really heard of the maximum wage, and to be honest,
John, shut your mouth.
I'm kind of. There was something I saw a while ago that somebody brought up that was similar to that why don't we just all agree that if you hit $1 billion in personal liquid wealth, that you won the game. Everything after $1 billion just goes into a lottery or something. It's you don't congratulations, you're great, you're awesome. Why do you need that much money? I don't want that much money. I can't even imagine what it's like to make $100,000.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. None of us I just don't think none of us have made that much money. And to make that much money, you have to be different. And I know if I made that...
But why do you have to make that much money?
But I'm just going to tell you. I know if I made that much money, I'd be like, you fucks. You don't know how hard it was for me to make this money. And no one gets to tell me what to do with something that's mine. Fuck you. This is mine. I will do with it as I please. And I feel like that's how they feel. And I agree.
Oh, the unfortunate reality is class mobility. I mean, the ability to be born lower class and rise through the classes, or the ability to be born upper class and fall, is at the lowest point ever. Ever. So the fact is that most of the people who are millionaires were born in millionaire families. Most of the people who make, who make their six-figure, $250,000, $500,000 salaries had parents who made the equivalent $250,000 to $500,000 salaries. Most of the people who go and get their PhDs or their law degrees come from families of lawyers and doctors as well. Class mobility is a myth perpetuated to continue the cycle of inequality we have. We would not have a system of so many have-nots and a handful of haves if not for this myth that maybe one day I'll strike it rich too. Maybe one day I'll do it too. And that's also how war is propagated too. We have this great myth of the United States as some liberator of people, and maybe one day we'll get to have the gun too. But the fact is that in both scenarios, it's a farce and a lie used to manipulate the masses. Out of the 350 million people here in the United States, very few will reach that level. In fact, in Oregon, 3 people have as much wealth, not income, wealth, as the bottom half of Oregon. The bottom 50% of Oregon, if we all put our checking accounts, retirement accounts, everything together, have as much wealth as 3 people. You can look that up at the Oregon Center for Public Policy. In Oregon today, wealth inequality and income inequality is at its highest we've ever seen. And the result of that you see on the streets of Corvallis and Eugene and Portland. That is the reason why things are this way. If those 3 people had half as much money, woohoo, like how much money could be redistributed? So, these are collective decisions we've made as a society, whether we realize we're making the decision or not, that 3 people can have as much money as half of Oregon, over 1 million people. Would you think that that's a fair and reasonable society?
Well, my issue that I have with the whole thing, right, is who gets to tell them that they can't?
I would say 2.6 million Oregonians should tell them. We should come together and tell them.
But why? But why? Right? I understand what you're saying. I'm not gonna lie. Like I will agree with you that the disintegration of the middle class is very concerning. Right? That's not good. That never. If you look historically, if you lose your middle class and if people lose hope, that's not good. Your society implodes, right? But I don't have as much of an issue with people getting rich, right? Like I aspire to be rich at some point in my life. I every day I work towards that goal, right?
Can I interject real quick?
No. But
do you aspire to be rich because money, or do you aspire to be wealthy and rich because money equals freedom?
Money equals freedom.
Ooh.
So why should we make it a competitive thing? Shouldn't people just be able to enjoy their God-given rights and what do they always say, natural rights?
Yeah.
That are given to us by our creator or whoever you want to call, Why do we have to rely on some false prophet human-driven system to make it a giant pissing contest?
No, I would agree. We're the only animal on the planet that pays to live, right? We have a pretty dumb, society, right? But I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It would be nice to, have the ability to buy whatever I want. I agree. I want financial independence and financial freedom, right? That's the end game. But in order to get innovation, they're like, generally speaking, this is the argument that's always used, innovation tied to compensation is good. Like you're not going to be able to innovate. If you look at any of the communist country, they always steal technology from the capitalist societies, right? Whether it's not a perfect system, and I'm not even sure that we're really in capitalism anymore, right? But at one point in time, it was pretty good. And also, I will also say that, like, as shitty as it is, man, we're just going down a whole myriad of places, and I love it. As shitty as we have a lot of problems, I still to this day do believe that this is the best country. Now, as far as Andrea, I want to get back to kind of the homeless thing. I don't know what solves that problem, because we throw millions and millions and millions of dollars of all of our money at it, and it just keeps getting worse. So throwing millions and millions of dollars, ooh, she got excited. She's like, no, we fucking don't. I won. All right, come on in.
Okay, how many public housing, social housing, publicly funded apartments do you think we built last year in Oregon?
I don't know. Probably not that many.
None. None. Because what the thing is, these fucking leeches, and I will say that these parasites and leeches called the landlord and real estate equity industry, whatever you want to goddamn call them, what they do is these private public partnerships where we spend money through tax incentives, tax breaks. We give grants. We do everything, every mental gymnastic you can imagine, except for give people apartment keys and build new apartments that are in a city center or in a place that it makes sense to give people a frickin' place to sleep. There are many, many, many places in the world that do not have what we are dealing with, because they literally just say there's private housing and it can have all the bells and whistles, but you know what? We got some engineers with their little hats on, and we're going to build some efficient buildings so that if you have no place to stay and you have no apartment, fill out some paperwork, here's an apartment for you. And you know what? It works pretty well. And for, again, most of human society, hundreds of thousands of years, we never let people die in the streets just a mile away from us. Like, it's unheard of and it's inhumane. So we spend a lot of money, but not smartly, because we don't build public housing anymore. And do you know why we don't really build public housing or social housing in the United States?
I mean, it didn't really turn out very well for my people. The projects were not good.
No, those were not good at all. Those were not good. And I totally agree. There's ways it is done across Europe and across Asia and across South America and in Africa. There's many places where social and public housing is built and ran well. And then there's many places it is underfunded, as you mentioned, as a lot of big like projects in New York and in other cities. It's not funded, not taken care of, and it's treated as an afterthought, and it's not prioritized. And then we've reached the state where we barely tried it, and then we didn't even try it very well. And now we just go for these public-private partnerships, or in Oregon, a lot of deals where if you have a certain number of rent-controlled units for 5 years, you get 5 tax-free years, and then you can up the rent however much you want. But I mean, I guess in terms of freedom, if healthcare was free, if housing was, well, not free, no cost, if housing was no cost, and if food was no cost, and if all of your basic needs were met, would you still need $1 million if you had food, your flu shot, the ability to see a doctor, and you had a warm place to sleep?
Yes, I would need more. 100%.
Hell yeah.
100%.
I respect that.
There's a lot of traveling I'd like to do. There's a lot of things I'd like to learn. I'd want to invest more, to make more. I plan on having a family at one point. I want to set them up for life, right? If I have a business, I can pay my kids $6,000 a year as an employee, right? And invest that. It's almost better than a Roth IRA. There are a bunch of tricks that the rich employ to set up future generations. And I would encourage each and every one of you that are listening to look into it. right? Like, I'm just saying, like, there's
I believe it's South Korea that the government takes 100%. There's no inheritance in a state handed down generation to generation. So even some of that's kind of an anomaly in the U.S.
That's insane.
Where we allow such wealth transfer.
That's insane, though. Like, you can't. You've just said that you hate the government. Why do you want them to get fucking paid? And why are you so against the individual getting paid? It doesn't make any sense.
Have you ever worked for the federal government? Have
I've worked for
been a federal employee before?
Directly, not through a shell company.
I've worked for like a state government before, and you get paid once a month, and you've got all the holidays off. The government, you don't work.
I've worked for an institution that's paid for mostly and has to follow federal rule. And most of my family's work has been through that, or either directly.
Government jobs are awesome.
Well, I used to work for the United States Geological Survey.
Nice.
I used to work for the Environmental Protection Agency, and I used to work for the Department of Defense. And what I will say, there's a lot of hard-working people there. Not a lot of people getting rich, right? So
no way.
No. So
but you get all these holidays off.
Money,
you get all these holidays off. Like you get holidays off.
Not that many.
Every fucking banking.
You want those holidays off?
Yes, but that's not how. That's not how.
I envision a world where we all work as we need to. None of us are too hurried. None of us are too sick. We all have plenty of time to spend with our dogs and our kids. And I think the government employment should be a model for how all workers are treated, which is paid reasonably, paid fairly, accountable to the public, accountable to each other. And federal workers do so much and honestly don't ask for a whole lot. And I don't know. So when I think of paying taxes, what I think of is essentially, have you ever shared food with roommates where like one person buys the cereal, the other person buys the oat milk?
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean that's a government, right? That is collective decision making.
Oh my God, Rick, you've participated in communism. They're going to take your libertarian card.
You've done socialism.
No, I haven't.
Done socialism, my friend.
I look at all the government essentially as fucking white collar welfare. I hate them, but again, we're coming at it from two different perspectives.
Keep in mind the biggest source of white collar welfare is the private financial and just business industry. They take so much welfare.
No, they're producing.
Oh my God!
Producing. Yeah. I'm not saying that the military is still part of the government, but if you're talking about banking,
I mean like business military, like Northrop Grumman.
But they're producing goods or services the government is fucking leeching from us. There's a difference.
Oh.
I mean, but the government's playing. I was gonna say the government's playing middleman for Boeing and Northrop Grumman to leech money from us to build bombs to kill brown people.
Not true.
Are you both in Corvallis?
No, I'm in Westland.
I am.
Westland? Okay, so two examples just in any city. Tell me if you think these are the parasites of our society.
Yes.
The library.
Solid.
And the public health building, like the public hospital that we used to have still have many thriving, like public healthcare facilities. Like I had in Lawrence, Kansas, a public mental health facility with public workers and public social workers. Are these the leeches of society?
I mean, those are two good examples out of 972. So you're not batting that high.
Okay.
What about public works, the water,
experiment.
electricity?
Public works. I've worked for public works. Decent, pretty solid. Wastewater management, pretty solid.
I'm not gonna play the game of like if we don't, who builds the roads thing. Like,
I'm not that crazy.
That's the instant kneecap to any libertarian. Is what about the roads?
So the fact is what we're naming these things that aren't that bad. These are a fraction of our taxes. The vast majority goes to cops and tanks, right? So I think if we think about, there's two questions really. is it good for people to come together and collectively and democratically distribute shared resources and pay in and take out of a shared system so that more equitable and fair life outcomes happen? The government question is very different than should governments fashion themselves as states, draw boundaries, create laws, prisons, enforcers, and have a monopoly on violence. The state, military, prison, industrial apparatus, a totally separate question, I feel.
Were you talking about, were you, in that example you just gave, are you talking about like states' rights versus federal government rights? I got a little bit confused there.
State is in the capital S, like a nation state.
Yeah,
the U.S.-Mexico border. Yeah. Should it exist, and why?
Are we going here?
Yeah,
okay. That's a conversation for a different podcast. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I legitimately have no clue about the U.S.-Mexico border and either is it a crisis or is it not? I do not know. I do not understand.
Or Oregon-Washington border.
The California border.
Like who draws these borders and why?
I mean, I feel like you're like team like no human is an alien, and that's okay. I like that team. That's a good team. I do feel like I might be inclined to agree, but then there's I just don't know. It's very interesting.
Yeah,
it's very interesting. We were running out of time. I could sit around. I feel like we're spinning our wheels here, but I feel like I could talk to you for hours. That's for damn sure. Thank you so much for being on this pod. It's been a joy. I want to, send me some of the history. Send me some books, some links that I could kind of check out to educate myself. And I'm very interested in the way that you think. I like the way your mind works. I'm glad that there are humans that exist like you that care. So
same to you. It's always a pleasure to be on here, and thank you for doing this work. I like the way your mind works, that you're able to have people on, have these discussions, and keep working through hypotheticals and thinking and reasoning around instead of I remember there are some people that you're like, oh, what do you think about labor unions? And they're like, I hate the unions. They slam the door, that sort of thing. So thank you for having me on.
I do want, one of the things I do want to say is I would like for you to study the people that you don't like, these billionaires and these millionaires and these entrepreneurs. And the reason I say that is I think that you will figure out that the system it's pretty fucked up, but these people that are making this amount of money, they're really smart. And a lot of them have written books on how you can get creative on hiding, not paying less taxes, ways to bring down your taxable income.
Why
ways
do you think they got so rich?
Ways that you can expense it. I'm just saying, and how to invest, right? Because my fear is like you're going to live a life that is about service and helping people, and then when you're like 70, what if you're bankrupt and poor, and you're like, what the fuck? I don't want this.
I have two things to leave you with. One, I have a half-completed minor in business from the University of Kansas, because I took one step in, I took a few courses, and then I did a 180 and I walked right back out. So I have a half-completed minor. The second thing is I have personally tracked every single budget transaction I have ever made for 11 years. And I understand, even as far as war tax evasion, which are people who say, I want to make as little money as possible so that I pay as little as possible in federal taxes to vote with my dollar and not support the war effort. I hope you know that I've studied their tools, and I've studied 401(k)(3)Bs, Roth, and traditional 401ks and IRAs, and
you invested?
I've seen enough of it to know that.
Have you invested?
I tell you what, I don't make a lot of money, so if I had a lot of money, I would do a whole lot more. I tell you what, I got that meager a little bit of federal TSP, Federal Retirement Plan. And I tell you what, I got that little bit. If I had more, I'd do more. But what I do know is I am invested in the Rick's Mind podcast. You can count on that.
All right. Yeah, you're an angel. Thank you so much for being on. We're going to talk finances after the show. Just
Let's do it.
All right. Hey, folks, thanks for listening. We've got, again, I'm going to be sharing off camera some of the investments in the Rick's Mind portfolio. We've invested in private prisons because they trade legally on stock exchange. That's not a joke. We are holding Raytheon. We're about the future. We're about the future here. We invest in the industries.
We need to have a board meeting
that change the world. All right, folks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening.
Okay, check out my non-lethal human restraint NFTs after the jump. See you, comrade.
All right, folks. We'll talk to you next week.